I never really thought my marriage would get to this point. Angela and I had our fair share of ups and downs, sure, but I always believed we were solid. We'd been together for 8 years, married for 5. She was the kind of woman who could be bitchy and dismissive one minute, then sweet and charming the next. Honestly, I thought that was just her personality. We had a pretty normal life. Work, friends, the occasional vacation, and I thought that was enough. But lately, I'd started noticing things that didn't add up. It began with small stuff, her phone always being on silent, her disappearing for hours without telling me where she was going, and her brushing off my questions like I was bothering her. I shrugged it off at first, thinking she was just stressed or busy. She's a high-powered marketing exec, so I figured her late nights and secretive texts were just part of her job. But then I started catching her in little lies. Like she would say she was working late, but then I'd see her out with some guy, or she'd change plans at the last minute. The biggest sign was when she suddenly started taking her phone everywhere, even to the bathroom. That's when I got suspicious. One night I decided to check her messages when she was asleep. I didn't want to believe it, but my heart was pounding as I unlocked her phone and scrolled through. And there it was, a string of messages between her and a guy named Ryan, an old friend from college, someone she claimed she hadn't seen in years. Only the texts told a different story. They started off innocently enough. Follow-up questions about the podcast episode I did on relationship psychology, she had told me. I remembered her mentioning that she was interviewing this guy, Ryan, for some podcast she'd been obsessed with. But then the texts took a weird turn. They started chatting late at night, and I could see the tone shift from friendly to flirty. Then came the messages about meeting up for drinks, then breaking the routine and doing something fun. It was clear they were planning something, and I knew what it was. What made it worse was the photos attached to the messages. Not explicit, not yet, but enough to make my stomach turn. Small pictures of hotel keys, a selfie she sent him from her office that I recognized from her Instagram, and a few shots of a nightstand with a glass of wine. Just enough to confirm my gut feeling she was cheating on me. And she was doing it with someone I had trusted, someone I'd interviewed about relationships, someone she told me was just an old friend. I didn't confront her right away. I needed to process it all first. I sat there for hours, staring at her phone, feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. Every ounce of trust I'd ever had for her was bleeding out. I thought about all the times she'd dismissed my concerns, the little lies she'd told, and the way she'd casually brushed me off when I asked if everything was okay. Now I knew why she'd been so distant, so secretive about her phone. She'd been sneaking around behind my back with Ryan, probably for weeks. So I made my decision. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I knew I had to confront her, but I also knew I had to plan my next move carefully. I wasn't just angry. I was betrayed, humiliated, and hurt in ways I'd never experienced before. I loved her, or at least I thought I did, but this was a breach I didn't think I could forgive. I felt my stomach knot up every time I thought about her with him, and I knew I needed to see her face to face and get the truth out of her, no matter how much it hurt. I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore, not after what I'd found. The next day, I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I needed to see her, to hear her lie to my face and watch her squirm. I arranged to come home early from work, something I rarely did, and when I walked in, I could already tell something was off. The apartment was suspiciously quiet, no sign of her typical chaos. I found her in the living room, sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like she wasn't expecting me. "Hey," she said, trying to sound casual, but there was this sharp edge to her voice that caught my attention right away. I didn't waste any time. I pulled her phone out of her hand and looked her straight in the eyes. "Who is Ryan?" asked, voice flat but firm. Her eyes widened for a split second, then she immediately started with the lies. "What are you talking about? That's just some guy from my podcast. We were just discussing follow-up questions. It's nothing seriously. You're overreacting." She paused for a second, then added, "You're being paranoid. I don't even know what you saw." I shook my head. "Don't lie to me, Angela. I saw the messages, the photos. You've been sneaking around. I thought we were past this kind of bullshit." She rolled her eyes, scoffing. "Oh, please, you think I'd cheat on you? With some nobody, that's so dramatic, you're always so insecure. Maybe if you paid more attention to me instead of obsessing over my phone, you'd see I'm faithful." Her voice was bitter, her tone full of contempt, like I was some jealous lunatic reading into things. But I wasn't buying it. I knew her too well. That defensive attitude, the quick denial, it was textbook. I felt my blood boil as I looked at her, realizing how much she'd been lying, hiding this from me for who knows how long. My mind raced with all the moments I dismissed as normal, all the times I'd shrugged off her coldness or her evasiveness. I felt sick. "Does Ryan mean anything to you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She scoffed again. "Ryan, he's just some guy I interviewed for the podcast. We had a few follow-up questions about psychology, that's all, that's it. You're blowing this out of proportion." "Really? Because it looks like you're planning to meet him tonight," I shot back, holding up the photos I found. Her face twitched, her eyes darted away for a moment, then she snapped. "Look, I don't know what you want me to say, it's not what you think. I swear I didn't cheat on you, we were just talking. I was curious about some of the things he said during the interview, that's all." Her voice was high-pitched, like she was trying to convince herself as much as me. I couldn't believe her. I felt my stomach turn violent with rage and heartbreak. I wanted to scream, to shake her, but I kept my composure. Instead, I told her I needed some space, that I was going to think about what she said. She tried to argue, but I cut her off. I told her I'd be in the other room and I didn't want to see her until she was ready to be honest. As I sat alone in the bedroom, my mind was spinning. It was like my entire world had just shattered. I kept thinking about her lies, about how deep she must have been involved with Ryan. All those late nights, the secret texts, the hotel meetings she was so eager to deny. How could she do this? How could she betray me, the guy who'd always been there, who loved her? And yet I also felt a strange, heavy sadness, because deep down I knew it was over. No matter what she said, no matter how much she lied, I could see it. The trust was gone, completely gone. In that moment I realized I couldn't stay silent anymore. I had to decide what I was going to do next. Confronting her was only the beginning. The pain was raw and I was furious. But underneath it all, I also knew I had to think about my own future. How much more of this betrayal I could take, how much more of her bullshit I was willing to endure. Because if there was one thing I'd learned, it was that once someone cheats, everything changes. And I wasn't sure if I could ever look at her the same way again. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind kept circling around everything I'd uncovered. The way she lied, the way her eyes darted away when I asked about Ryan, her defensiveness. It was all so obvious now, the game she'd been playing. I kept replaying the moments, trying to find some sign I'd missed, some clue that would make this easier to accept. But there was no denying it anymore. Angela had been cheating on me. The worst part was feeling this mix of emotions, anger, betrayal, sadness, like I'd been hit by a freight train. I trusted her more than anyone, and she'd taken that trust and shattered it with some stupid affair with a guy I'd thought was just a friend. I kept asking myself how I didn't see it earlier, how I could have been so blind. Maybe I'd been too busy working, too caught up in pretending everything was fine. Or maybe I just didn't want to see the signs. By morning, I knew I had to do something. I couldn't keep living in this limbo. I decided I'd confront her again, this time with a plan. I needed her to tell me the truth, no more lies. I also decided that I'd record her. If she was planning to gaslight me or deny everything again, I wanted proof that I could use later. I had a feeling this wasn't going to be a clean break. I wanted to be prepared for whatever happened next. When she finally came out of the bedroom, her hair was messy, her eyes red from crying or maybe just from exhaustion. She tried to act like everything was normal, like she hadn't just been caught in some elaborate lie, but I wasn't falling for it. "So Ryan," I said, pulling out my phone, "you want to explain what exactly you two are doing? Because I've got the messages, the pictures, the texts. Don't even bother denying it. I want the truth." Her face twisted with anger, then she scoffed. "Oh, so now you're spying on me? That's pathetic. You're invading my privacy and I don't have to explain shit to you're right," I said, voice calm but firm. "I don't have to, but I want to know why. Why did you lie? Why did you betray me?" I kept recording her, knowing she'd try to brush it off, deny everything, but I wanted her to say it, whatever it was. She crossed her arms, her bitchy attitude returning. Look, I don't owe you explanations. Maybe I was just bored. Maybe I met someone new. Who cares? It's not like you've been perfect. Maybe this is what you wanted, me to be honest about how much I've been miserable. Maybe I'm finally free. That hit me like a punch in the chest. I felt this surge of pain and anger all at once. I'd always tried to be understanding, to give her space and trust her, even when I had doubts. But now I saw how she'd been manipulating me, how she'd been lying to my face for months. I didn't know whether to cry, scream, or punch something. Listen, I said, voice trembling, I don't want to hear your excuses. I just want to know if there's anything else I should know. Are you sleeping with? Is this more than just some texting and hotel meetups? She rolled her eyes and snorted. God, you're so paranoid. No, I haven't slept with him. I don't owe you anything, honestly. Maybe I'm just tired of pretending everything's okay. Or maybe I wanted to see if I still could get away with it. I don't know. None of this really matters anymore, does it? That was the moment I realized I was done. Done with the lies, the deception, the fake smiles, and the little half-truths she'd been feeding me. I turned off the recorder and looked at her with disgust. I think you should go, I said. Pack your stuff and leave. I don't want to see you again until you've figured out what you really want, me or Ryan, because I'm not going to be part of this mess anymore. She looked at me with pure hatred, then spat, fine. If that's what you want, I'll leave. But don't think you're getting rid of me that easy. You're not the only one who can play games, buddy. And with that, she stormed out, slamming the door behind her. For a moment, I just stood there, listening to her footsteps fade down the hall. My chest was tight, my head pounding, but I felt this strange sense of relief. I'd finally confronted her and I'd documented everything. I didn't know what was coming next, but I knew I wasn't going to be a doormat anymore. I'd been too trusting, too naive, and now I'd pay the price. But at least I was awake to it. I wasn't going to be the victim of her lies anymore. Not after this. The silence that followed her departure was deafening. I stood there for a long time trying to process everything. The surge of anger, the overwhelming betrayal, and this strange numbness that took hold of me. Part of me wanted to call her, to beg her to stay, to scream at her for the countless lies she'd told. But another part knew what needed to be done. I wasn't going to chase after her. She had made her choice, and I needed to figure out mine. I took a deep breath and sat down on the couch, pulling out my phone. I decided I'd record everything she said, every word, in case I needed it. Later, I also started scrolling through the messages again, making sure I had all the evidence I needed to make sense of what I'd uncovered. The more I looked, the more I realized how deeply she'd been lying to me, not just about Ryan, but about everything. The way she dismissed my concerns, the way she hid her phone, the way she acted like I was crazy for suspecting her. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. I'd always thought she was so bitchy and difficult, but I never imagined she was capable of this level of deception. It was like some twisted game she was playing, and I was the pawn she'd thrown aside. I felt my stomach turn again. The pain of betrayal was sharp and raw. I'd loved her, trusted her, and now I saw how flimsy that trust had been. It felt like my entire world was crumbling. I spent the next hour making calls, calling a lawyer, calling a friend who knew about these kinds of situations. I wasn't ready for any drastic moves yet, but I wanted to be prepared. I knew I'd need to decide whether to fight for the marriage or cut ties entirely. The thought of divorce crossed my mind more than once. I'd never seen myself as that guy, but now I wondered if I had any choice. While I was lost in thought, my phone buzzed. It was a message from Angela. I hesitated for a second before opening it. It was a short text. You're overreacting. You don't know what you're talking about. I'll be back later to talk. That made my blood boil. She was trying to manipulate me again, to make me feel guilty or crazy for what I'd found. I knew her pattern: deny, blame, dismiss, and I refused to fall for it. I wanted her to understand that I wasn't just some fool to be played anymore. I decided I'd wait her out, see if she actually came back. But inside, I was already planning my next steps. I was done being the naive husband. I was done pretending everything was fine. I knew this was going to change everything, whether I liked it or not. I had to get my head straight and decide what I was willing to accept and what I was. As the hours dragged on, I felt a strange mix of relief and Despair. The relief in knowing I finally saw the truth, and despair because I knew the pain of losing what I thought was my life. But deep down, I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I'd been blind, trusting her blindly, but now I saw her for who she truly was. And that, in a twisted way, was almost a liberation. I was finally awake, finally aware. I just didn't know what that meant for us moving forward. All I knew was that things would never be the same. The next day, I woke up feeling like I'd been run over by a truck. The adrenaline from yesterday had worn off, leaving behind this dull ache in my chest. I kept replaying everything, the lies, the betrayal, the moment I kicked her out. Honestly, part of me wanted to call her, to beg her to come back, to pretend it was all a mistake. But I knew better. That part of me was weak, and I wasn't going to fall back into the cycle of her manipulation. Instead, I decided to do some honest thinking. I pulled out all the evidence, her texts, the photos, the voice recorder I'd turned on. During our confrontation, I listened to the recordings again. Her voice was full of attitude, so dismissive, so bitchy, and yet underneath it I could hear the panic, the desperation to deny everything. I knew she was lying, but hearing it again made it more real. It made it undeniable. The more I thought about it, the more I realized I had to be strategic. If I just confronted her again without a plan, she'd spin her usual lies, deny everything, and try to charm her way out of it. No, I had to be smarter. I decided I'd get a lawyer, start figuring out my options, and prepare for what was coming next. I didn't want to be caught off guard when she tried to manipulate her way back in. While I was making calls, I also started to reflect on my own feelings. I was angry, yes, but I also felt a deep sadness I hadn't expected. I'd loved her, or at least I'd thought I did. Now I couldn't see her the same way. The betrayal cut so deep, I wondered if I'd ever trust anyone again. I wondered if I was making the right move, or if I was just throwing away what little we had left. But no matter how much I hesitated, I knew I'd reach a point where I had to decide, stay and try to fix this, or walk away completely. I wasn't going to be someone's fool anymore. I deserved better than this. I deserved honesty, respect, and loyalty, and if she couldn't give me that, then I had to walk away. Later that day, I got a message from her again, this time more desperate. She said she wanted to talk, that she was sorry, that she'd made a huge mistake. I didn't bother replying. I knew she was just trying to manipulate me, to play the victim and get me to forgive her. But I was done with that. I had already made up my mind. I wasn't going back. Instead, I looked at my options. I knew I had to prepare for the worst. I was not a man who liked drama or chaos, but I knew this situation was different. It was going to change my life forever. I had to be ready to face the fallout, the emotional pain, the legal battles, whatever came next. I also knew I had to protect myself emotionally and financially. I wasn't going to let her sabotage me or keep pulling me back into her twisted game. As the sun set, I sat alone on the couch, feeling a strange mixture of relief and dread. I'd finally uncovered the truth, and I'd decided to take action. Part of me felt broken, but another part felt stronger than ever. I'd been blind, naive, and trusting, too trusting. But now I was awake. I was ready to face whatever came, even if it meant starting over. Because deep down, I knew I deserved better than this. And I was finally going to find out what that really was. In the days that followed, I threw myself into action. I contacted a lawyer and started gathering everything. The evidence from her texts, the pictures, the recordings. I knew I couldn't just walk away without solid proof, especially if she decided to deny everything or spin her usual lies. The thought of her trying to manipulate her way back into my life made me sick, but I was determined to be prepared. I also told a few close friends, those I trusted most, just to have some support in case. Things got ugly. Angela kept trying to reach out, sending pathetic messages, trying to guilt me into taking her back. She played the victim, acting like she was the one who had been wronged, like she was the innocent party. I didn't respond. I knew better. I saw her for what she was, a manipulative, vindictive woman who thought she could get away with anything. But I also felt something else, relief. I was finally free from the web of lies she'd spun around me. The hardest part was dealing with the emotional fallout. I loved her, or at least I thought I did. The betrayal hit me hard, and I often wondered if I'd ever trust again. But more than that, I realized how much I'd sacrificed, my dignity, my peace of mind, for someone who didn't value me enough to be honest. I had to rebuild myself piece by piece. I started going to therapy, talking about what I'd been through, trying to process the anger and sadness. It helped more than I expected. One evening, I sat in my apartment, reflecting on everything. The pain was still there, but it was different now, less raw, more distant. I'd done what I could to protect myself legally, emotionally, and practically. I'd set boundaries, cut her out of my life, and decided I was better off without her. Looking back, I learned some hard lessons. Trust is fragile. People can be manipulative and selfish, and sometimes the love you give isn't enough to save even a long-standing relationship. But I also learned that you don't have to settle for betrayal. Sometimes you have to walk away, face the pain, and start over, because staying would only make you complicit in the damage. Now I'm focusing on myself. I've started new hobbies, made new friends, and I'm slowly rebuilding my confidence. It's not easy, but I know I'm better off alone than in a relationship built on lies and deceit. Angela is out of my life for good, and honestly, that's a relief. I don't hate her, I just see her for what she is now. A manipulative woman who thought she could get away with breaking my heart. The biggest thing I want anyone reading this to understand is this: don't ignore the signs. Don't let someone's bitchy attitude or lies slide because you're too afraid to face the truth. Trust your gut. If something feels off, it probably is. And if you catch your partner cheating, don't waste your time on their excuses or manipulations. Cut ties, move on, and never look back. Because in the end, your happiness and self-respect are what matter most. No one is worth sacrificing your peace of mind for. I've learned that the hard way.